Hello there, and welcome to the second module in the Delivery Cluster series. Welcome to your certificate for and training assessment. We're hoping that you are really enjoying the content so far, getting a lot out of these learning modules. And certainly if you've got any questions at all about your assessments, we hope that you are reaching out and certainly asking questions. And you're really starting to get a good picture and good understanding of the vet sector, how it all works, and certainly starting to get a picture of training, what it really is, what it isn't, and how you can really equip and empower your learners to get the most out of your sessions. So in the first delivery cluster, we sort of really went over, well, what is training? Ultimately, what are we trying to achieve? What is it? And we discovered that it's ultimately trying to create change in a group of learners or even an individual so that they have a shift in their thinking and they go out and act differently. Okay? We looked at the difference between training and education. And we looked at all the different aspects of how we would certainly prepare for a session and make sure that if anything went wrong, we were prepared. All right. Now, in this session, we're going to look at the fundamentals of making a session going from average to great. Looking at the fundamentals of how do we really make content come alive? How do we really build in activities into a session that really engage learners? And look at the fundamentals of what needs to happen for someone to actually learn something. What is learning? How does it happen? And the stages that someone goes through. In the third cluster, we're going to look at the actual structure that you would use to deliver the information. But this session, we're going to really look at how do we make it as engaging as possible, and certainly the stages that someone needs to go through in order to acquire the new knowledge that you're going to give them. Okay, so let's get straight into it. Alright, so as always, tips for getting the most out of this webinar: have a notepad available, be prepared to do the activities as we go through them, and have a do not disturb sign on your desk, alright, or wherever you're watching the webinar. Alright, so 4 stages of knowledge acquisition. All right. Now, this is a critical thing to understand because many times people get stuck in the stages and there's a perception that maybe someone's learned something when really they actually haven't completely learnt it. Okay. So, for example, showing a PowerPoint slide and sharing some information with someone, they really haven't learnt it. All they have done is just heard it. Okay, so there's 4 stages to knowledge acquisition, and let's go through the 4 stages, and you'll probably be able to relate to this in, certainly something that you may have learnt in the past, and maybe you've got completion around that learning. Maybe there's something that you're in the middle of learning. Maybe you're only at, stage 1, 2, or 3 in learning that particular thing. So let's take a look at the 4 stages. The first stage is exposure. All right, so I'm going to expose you to an idea. You're going to hear it, you're going to see it, and it's just hearing or knowing about a concept. So we say someone would be exposed to an idea. Maybe they're exposed to a leadership principle or a certain skill set. They see it and they now become aware of it. Now, the second stage is practice, okay? So I'm going to share a concept with you, and then we're going to practice it in a confined or simulated scenario or a case study or something like that, okay? So this P here is practice, all right? So we're going to practice using the concept, okay? Now, the next one is personalization. So P stands for personalization. So let's say I expose you to a leadership concept, okay? So let's go with Stephen Covey's, famous 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the concepts is start with the end in mind, all right? So practice. We would think about maybe all the different areas in business that you could apply this concept, all right? And you would practice it, you would actually apply it to a case study or something that's been given to you, or maybe even a discussion or something like that. Next aspect is personalization, okay? Now, personalization is when we make it relevant to us and our lives. So we would look at the concept of start with the end in mind, and we would think, okay, in my life, how could I apply that? And we would look at one specific scenario and we would really dive deep into applying that to our life and our scenarios and how it really applies to us as an individual. Okay. Now, the last stage there is application. Now, this is when we take the concept outside the realm of our lives and we actually apply it to a real life situation. So maybe we go out and we actually have a conversation with someone and we start with the end in mind and we discover, what's the outcome, what are we trying to achieve, and we work backwards, okay? Maybe in business, we actually go out there and we initiate a project and we do it through this brand new concept that we've learned, okay? And we actually apply what we've learned. Now, see, the thing is, learning isn't complete until these 4 stages have been done, okay? So, for example, sometimes there's a belief that we expose somebody to an idea and they have learnt it. Well, no, they haven't learnt it until they have certainly practiced it, got a feel for it, got some experience with it, and then they have worked out the limits of the concept. And then they've made it applicable for their lives. And then last of all, they've actually gone out and applied it, because it's in the application that you certainly learn the most, okay? So the other way to think about this is when we're exposing someone to something, often this will be where we are providing them a resource or a textbook, okay? So when we give somebody a textbook, we're exposing them to knowledge. And then within the textbook, there could be some activities or exercises, and that would be the practice. Then one of the questions in the textbook could be, now review your own life and you write down how you would apply this principle. And that's pretty much as far as it goes. And then application, well, now let's go and take this principle that you've learned and apply it to a real world situation or context. Okay. So hopefully that's made sense for you. I've found that this model is critically important to remember as we are delivering content. And never be naive to think that when your students have left your training room that they've actually learnt something. Now, that may seem a bit harsh, but they have only learnt it if they have gone through all 4 of these stages, okay? So the more that you can build in all 4 stages into your training session, the more the probability that learning is and that knowledge is going to solidify for them, okay? And certainly you can't always go through all 4 stages in a training session, or even when their students are with you. Sometimes it's going to take a period of time for them to really solidify, okay? So 4 stages of competence, all right? Now, this is something you probably heard in various contexts and maybe quite a number of times before, but it is something that we need to keep it in mind. And the 4 stages that someone can go through as they are becoming aware of something or developing the skills is quite interesting to watch, because guaranteed everyone you ever teach is going to definitely go through these stages. Now, stage 1 is basically they don't know what they don't know, okay? So they're not even aware of a concept, right? So, for example, before I got my motorcycle license, I was completely even unaware that a motorcycle had gears on it. I had no idea that a bike even had a clutch and gears on it. I just didn't know, okay? Next stage is you know that you don't know, okay? So this is when you don't know, that you just you had no awareness at all. Now here you become aware, and this is where you might struggle a little bit. So you're going to jump on that motorbike and you're going to really struggle to use those gears of that clutch, all right? Because you just, you're trying to work it out, okay? And it's this stage that people can give up quite a lot, okay? Because they're suddenly overwhelmed with this brand new context of a experience, okay? Then we come in here, and this is where stage 3, conscious competence. So we know, stage 2, we know that we can't do it, and we really need to try, okay? Stage 3 is that we are aware that we can do it, but it takes a lot of conscious effort to do the task or get it done. Stage 4 is that we reaching a level of mastery. So we don't even need to think about the task when we do it. It just is naturally part of who we are, and the skill just naturally comes out of us. Okay, so for example, let's go with making a presentation. All right, unconscious incompetence. Maybe you have no awareness that a software program of PowerPoint even exists. So you're sitting in the audience and you're looking at the presenter and they're using PowerPoint, and you have no awareness that PowerPoint as a concept even is available. Okay, then here you go to make your first PowerPoint, and then you're trying to struggle to make your slides. Here, you can get to a place where you can make the slides, but you're still trying to navigate it and put it all together. Here, stage 4 is when you can put together a slideshow and not even think about what you're doing, and you've got some great confidence. And if someone says, well, how do you do that? You can simply teach them, and that would be no problem at all. Okay, so guaranteed your learners are going to go through these 4 stages in everything that they acquire. However, some skills will certainly be transferable. Okay, so have a think about in your life, if you were learning a brand new skill such as dancing, such as learning a brand new language for you, what are the stages that you could potentially go through? Okay. And let's pick language acquisition. All right, so let's imagine Africa. Let's pick a language in Africa. So you may not even know that a particular language in Africa exists. Okay, you don't know what you don't know, and then suddenly become aware of it, and this is where you are going to pick up some new phrases, and you're going to become aware that it's a lot harder than you thought. Okay, and then here you're going to get to a place where you can do it, but you really have to think about it. Okay, and maybe in your own mind you're translating sentences and you're really trying to get it right. Then last of all, stage 4 is where you can pretty much have a conversation and speak fluently. Okay, so again, have a think about in your life, what is a brand new skill or tasks that you would like to learn, and what are the potential stages that you would go through. Okay, another one could be cooking. All right, and also think about in your life up till now, what are the stages that you've gone through when you actually have learned a brand new skill. All right, really fascinating to unpack and to think about, because your learners are going to go through these 4 stages. All right, and it's very powerful when you can look at a learner and see what stage are they at. Okay, so learning theories at cert 4 level, it's not about just doing it, it's about knowing why it works or it doesn't work. All right, the theories give you the capacity to explain why something is successful or not. Okay, now as part of your TE, we're certainly not expecting you to be able to understand lots of learning theories or get very academic on things. However, there are 2 or 3 simple learning theories and I guess classroom ideas that you need to get your head around, so that you can have a good understanding as to what you're doing and why you're doing it. Okay, great masters eventually get to a stage where they can create consistent results using a system that's undeniable and will happen consistently, and they can know what to do, why they're doing it, and they can predict what's going to happen as a result. Okay, and that's where you certainly want to get to. So theories allow us to unpack why things might be happening, and again create further predictable results if we apply that learning theory. Okay, now there is 3 main theories that I like to talk about, and that are a good basis to start from. Okay, so the first one there is behaviorist learning theory. Now, in your notes and in your studies and your assessment, I do recommend that you go to Google and look at these theories in a little bit more detail. I'm only going to give you a very broad overview of these theories, because you can spend hours and hours unpacking the theories, but it's up to you how far you want to go. All right, there is some questions in your assessment about them. However, once you've developed a little bit of understanding and confidence in them, I recommend that you go out and start looking for some examples of each of these, and then you'll start to see how it all plays out. Okay, behaviorist learning theory. Essentially, behaviorist learning theory is the fact that people will learn through positive or negative reinforcement. So as people are growing up, if somebody is told, yes, good job, excellent, they are going to realize that they should do more of that thing, okay? But if somebody does something and they are negatively impacted, or they essentially get in trouble, then they would then that behavior or skill would be discouraged by the learner. Okay, so essentially it's positive and negative reinforcement. And yes, another way to put it could be the carrot and the stick. Okay, so as kids grow up, they are affirmed, or they are encouraged, or they are discouraged from particular behavior. Okay, so anytime that we are rewarding our students for great behavior or doing exactly what we want, then certainly that's going to lead them towards certainly realizing what is the desired behavior and what is the undesirable behavior. Okay. So B.F. Skinner was a big proponent of the behaviorist learning theory. Okay. So cognitive learning theory. This is essentially saying that a learner will need activities to discover and learn through experience. Okay, so cognitive learning theory is when we give our learners tasks or activities, and then they discover whatever they need to discover through those activities. So it's all about self-discovery of new learning and putting pieces together. Okay? And in cognitive learning theory, we're not essentially always going to tell our learners exactly what we want them to learn. They're going to discover it for themselves. Okay, socialist constructivist learning theory. This is a case of people learn through modeling behavior of other people. Okay, so mentorship is a big part of this. When a junior member is learning from a senior person, or a participant is watching someone else do something, they are developing the characteristics, beliefs, and behaviors of that person that they're looking at as well. All right. So it's all about socially constructed, so learning from social constructs and watching other people, watching models and mentors around them. Okay. Now, last one there is experiential learning theory. And this one basically says that people learn best through their experiences. And so this could be an example of when we might send someone out into the jungle or the forest and say, survive, see what happens, and they're going to learn from whatever happens through that experience. And accelerated learning and experiential learning is certainly a byproduct of experiential learning theory. Okay. So that's basically a very quick summation of the most common learning theories out there, and I do encourage you to Google them. However, I don't want you to feel that at a cert 4 level you have to understand them in ridiculous depth. I just want you to understand and be able to summarize each of them, okay? And when you can do that effectively, you'll probably be able to put justification behind why you might be doing things, okay? And you don't want to run a session driven all by behaviorist learning theory, or all by cognitive, or all by socialist, because you want to have that varied nature of delivery, and you want to make sure that you are meeting everybody's needs, okay? Because all of the theories have a place, and there is no better theory than another theory. They're all just different perspectives and ways of looking at the learning process. All right. So planning each session, you certainly want to make sure that you cover off each of these things in a session plan, it has a lot of benefits. All right, so we want to make sure that we've got our session plan available, and it is used by the trainer just so that you've got maximum consistency across delivery and how it happens. Okay. So, format of session plans, you're going to see a number of different varieties of session plans, and they're typically going to be done on templates, and every RTO is going to use different templates, and that's totally fine. They're going to use whatever is appropriate for their style of delivery. So don't freak out if you go to different training organizations and they've got different templates to what you might be used to. However, there are some fundamental things that must be included in a session plan, such as the session number, obviously, the duration, the unit and what it's actually related to, facilities and equipment that must be included, learning outcomes, an overview of the session, length of time for the session for sure, and as you can see here. All right, so this is just the top part of our session plan, and it's just one example. All right, so you may even see on the very other end of the scale, you may just see a blank page with some boxes, and it just may say activities, or it may just say content. But ultimately, remember that the more you notate and the more that you record, the higher the probability of consistency. And you need to remember that a session plan has been devised on purpose for a reason, and the trainer that's put it together has probably done it knowing what works. Okay, so always aim to follow the session plan and stay on task. Okay, so simplest planning technique on the planet. All right, a lot of times people can overcomplicate training sessions, and even when it comes to planning things, they struggle a little bit because they have a lot of creative ideas, but they're just not sure how to get them on paper. Okay, so I just want to share with you a simple methodology that you can start to use to plan out your sessions and really create moments that lead to new insights, awareness for learners, and also that you are going to specifically create those learning outcomes. Okay. Because in a training session, there's certainly a lot of things you need to cover, but the number one thing that you're looking to do is learn. How do I put this? Get learners to achieve those learning outcomes. Okay, it's not about just delivering content; it's about creating learning outcomes. Okay, so the TOA method, very, very simple. And it's a great strategy to have in your mind as you're looking at, okay, what am I going to teach and how am I going to teach it? Okay, so T stands for topic, okay, O stands for outcome, and then A stands for activity. So you've got topic, outcome, and activity. And essentially, topic is what are you going to teach, okay? So let's run an example. So T topic, it could be changing nappies. Okay, let's imagine we're teaching childcare. So T is topic. All right. Now the outcome. Well, the outcome could be by the end of the session, the students will be able to change a nappy to the appropriate standard using the nappy changing equipment of XYZ Childcare Centre and do it within 5 minutes. Okay. A stands for activity. Okay. So we would then think about, well, what are all the different activities that we could do in order to be able to help someone achieve that learning outcome? So we might say, all right, activity. All right. So the first thing that we could do would be to show them a video of a nappy change. All right, what's the next thing that we could do? Well, maybe we could get them up in front of a table and get them identifying the different tools that you would use in order to change the nappy. Okay, then the trainer would demonstrate. Okay, great. Then you would get the learners to have a go on a doll. Okay, and then the trainer would give some feedback. All right, good. And then essentially you would get them to do it on their own, right, and have a go. And then finally, you would get them to do it again and watch them do it and make sure that they've met all the criteria of what you've talked about. And then, yes, we could get them to do it on a live person for sure, all right? But I just want you to understand the process that we went through, okay? The topic. And this could be anything at all. It could be, boiling an egg. It could be cooking pasta. It could be anything at all. But here is the power. The power is defining the outcome. So I love to start out with, by the end of the session, you will be able to X, Y, Z in X period of time. Really, really important to include that. And then the activity is just think about all the activities that you could do in order to lead towards that learning outcome. And you may experiment with lots of different activities. However, everything you do is going to be driven towards this learning outcome. Okay? It's critically important that you are driving everything towards the outcome, because then you will know if the session has been successful or not. Okay, so you may have multiple TOAs in your session, or you may just have one or two, and you may be very specific. Okay, the more specific you can make your activities, and the more that they are aligned to the outcomes, the more successful your session is going to be. All right, so now let's think about how we can really sequence those activities to make sure that they lead towards that learning outcome. All right, and what I always remind people is that if any time you are finding that a learner is struggling or has even potentially lost motivation, it's often a clear sign that the activities have not been sequenced well. And the word or the phrase or the concept that we use to talk about sequencing is that of scaffolding. All right, I'll say it again, it's scaffolding. Now, what scaffolding means is that essentially, if I am going to teach someone to do something, I need to make sure that I always make it achievable and within inside somebody's achievable zone. Comfort zone is another way to put it, but we put it inside somebody's competence zone. And if I'm going to teach someone to, for example, do a 3-hour presentation, okay? So let's say that I said to you tomorrow, I'd like you to do a 3-hour presentation with no preparation, okay? That would probably be quite a stretch for most people. However, with effective scaffolding, over time, anything can be achieved. So imagine that we said to a learner, tomorrow I'd like you to do a 1-minute presentation. Then the next day we said, all right, I'd like you to do a 1.5-minute presentation. And then a 2-minute presentation, and then a 3-minute, and then a 5-minute, and then a 6-minute, and then an 8-minute, and then a 10-minute, and then a 15-minute presentation, and then a 20-minute presentation, and then a 30-minute presentation, and then a 1-hour presentation, and then an hour-and-a-half presentation, and then a 2-hour presentation, and then a 3-hour presentation, and then a 3-hour-and-a-half. I'm hoping you're getting the point. Now, through that process, we are effectively scaffolding. And we're never making the task beyond what the student's self-perceived capabilities may be. And if we ever stretch them too hard or give them something that's too hard, we are going to find that they're going to freeze up and they may go, I can't do that. And it would be like they were walking towards a diving board or diving ledge, and they are thinking, oh, I can't do it. And they're going to balk at the idea of doing it. However, when you start very small and simple, they are going to see that as, yes, achievable, I can do that. Yes, achievable, I can do that. Yes, achievable, I can do that. As soon as you make it something that's too hard, or something that is beyond their confidence level, it's going to create an emotional reaction. Okay, so sequencing it is critical. And if you think about the movie Karate Kid, in that movie series, they were exceptionally good at demonstrating great scaffolding. As a trainer, the better that you can get at scaffolding, the more predictable and the more effective your training is going to become. Okay, so get good at scaffolding. That's the biggest thing I'll say. All right, learn to scaffold, and you'll be able to teach anyone anything that you know about. All right, so if you don't do scaffolding, you're going to end up with creating students that are confused and overwhelmed. Okay, confusion and overwhelm is something you definitely want to avoid as much as possible. And essentially, confusion is a state when a student cannot link concepts together and they just have no reference points, okay? And they may even be asking themselves, how does this relate to that? Okay, that's the biggest question that somebody has. And the other part of it is, why am I learning this? Okay? So overwhelm is when somebody has been given too much information too soon and they don't know what to do with it, okay? Now, overwhelm could be, why am I learning this now? Okay, or how will I ever get all of this done? Okay, so I'll just talk on overwhelm for a moment. The biggest thing with overwhelm is to know how much information you are giving someone and how much they can digest at any one time. So it's critically important that when you share information, you allow time for the student to hear it, understand it, digest it, and once they've got it, then you can move on. Okay, so a very easy way to overwhelm someone would be on the whiteboard to write, today we will be covering page 9 to 99, okay? If anybody saw that, they'd probably have an emotional reaction and go, wow, there's no way that mentally I could take in that much information in the time period that we have, all right? And they would feel overwhelmed, okay? So, as a trainer, be very good at knowing how much information you are sharing and know that all learners have a mental capacity on how much they can take in at any one period of time. Okay, so top 10. I want to get you to think about what would be the top 10 characteristics of a great trainer in your mind. Top 10 characteristics. Are they approachable? Are they professional? Are they somebody that turns up on time? Are they engaging? Are they enthusiastic? Are they excited to train the content? Are they personable? Are they supportive of their learners? Are they someone that can create fun in the training room? Are they somebody that is accurate, knowledgeable, experienced? All these different things. What are they? All right. And I just give you a moment and encourage you to write down. For you personally, let's go. What would be your top 3 that would really demonstrate a great quality trainer? All right. And once you've written down those 3, come back to the webinar. But now let's look at what would be the top 10 that we found here at Success Training Academy. So we found that somebody for somebody to be a great trainer, they need to be organized. They need to be approachable. They need to be great at time management. They need to be fun. They need to be engaging, okay, and be able to create engagement. They need to be great or good at contextualization, i.e. making it relevant for an audience. They need to use a variety of teaching modes. They need to be respectful and professional. They need to have integrity, all right? Basically, integrity, the way that we perceive it, is that they will do what they say and they will do the right thing, okay? They have enthusiasm, passion for the topic, all right? And they actually care about the learners understanding it and using what they are teaching, okay? Certainly, there are a lot of other characteristics and qualities that we would want trainers to have. However, these are the top 10 that we have identified as the really critical ones for a trainer to develop over time. Okay, so 3 keys to an amazing training session. All right, and this is a model that's a really powerful way to think about your success as a trainer. Ultimately, as a trainer, there are so many different things that you could work on, so many different things that you could study within public speaking, or engagement skills, or practical games and different things that you could bring into a training session. So many different things that you could learn. However, ultimately, everything that we do in a training session really has to fall under these 3 categories, okay? And if these 3 categories are done and done exceptionally well, then you're going to have a great training session. So let's unpack them. So the first R stands for rapport, okay? Because without rapport, there can be no trust, and without trust, there is no influence. And as we've identified previously, for someone to learn something and for someone to, I guess, really, how do I put this? Understand a new concept, they first need to understand the relevance of it, and there needs to be a certain level of comfort when they are hearing something from a trainer. There needs to be a level of connection with that trainer, because if you don't trust someone, you're not going to listen to what they've got to say, and you will probably have barriers to being influenced. All right, so as a trainer, we need to be extremely good at building that rapport and creating the rapport within the room between learners as well. All right, so next one is E, and this relates to engagement, okay? So E stands for engagement, and engagement is basically response, okay? Response. So without rapport, there can be no response, okay? And this is where you are delivering your information and getting a response back from the audience, positive, verbal, non-verbal, whatever it might be, and they are getting involved with the content. All right. And last of all, R relates to retention. And as I've said previously, it's not about how much you get through that matters, it's about how much information gets through to your learners and they actually walk away, and how much they remember from your session is a critical factor. And when you learn to judge yourself on how much somebody remembers, you become a lot more effective as a trainer, because you speak differently, you act differently, you're happy to repeat things, you come up with dynamic ways to present content, because you know it's not about what you say, you know it's not about how much you get through, but how much gets through to your learners, okay? So rapport, engagement, and retention. And when you can walk away from a session and ask yourself, how much rapport did I have with that group? How much engagement was there with that group? How much were they interacting? How much were they responding to me when I asked a question? And constantly be asking yourself, well, how could I fix that? How could I modify that? How could I improve the levels of engagement? And last of all, how much did they actually remember from the session? When you use these 3 criteria, how you show up as a trainer is going to be radically different. Now, you also take nothing personally, and you'll constantly be thinking, all right, well, how can I develop my skills in that area even more? Now, let's unpack each. Rapport. So the definition of rapport is when you're a learner and you're a trainer, how much likeness is felt. So for example, if you're a learner and you're sitting there and you're listening to the trainer, do you feel that the trainer is just like you? And also the people next to you as learners, do you feel that they are like you? Okay, it's not that you like them, but there is a level of connection and likeness. Okay, so ultimately as a trainer, we are trying to demonstrate that we were once just like them, and we can relate to who they are and the journey that they're going on. Okay, so it's a definition of we are just here together, and there are many things that we have in common. Okay, so ultimately there's 2 aspects to rapport. There's the trainer's rapport with the group, and also rapport between the group members. Okay, so we need to think, how can we facilitate deeper levels of rapport? First one is that we want to do that through a strategic trainer intro. Okay, so that self-intro by the trainer would sound something like, hi, my name is, I have been a for X period of time. When I first started, I thought, and then over time I realized I love teaching this course because. So let me give you a complete example of that. So for example, hi, my name is Mark, and I'm a nurse, and I've been a nurse educator for about the last 25 years. When I first started nursing, I thought nursing was all about getting the medication right and treating the patients as quickly as possible. But I soon realized that it was even more than that. It was all about communication and equipping and empowering patients so that they felt better about themselves and could walk out of the hospital and walk out confidently and help them know that they were not coming back and were feeling healthy about themselves. I love teaching this course because I get to equip you guys with not just the medical skills, but also the communication skills to really impact your patients. Okay, full stop. Now, hopefully through that strategic self-intro, you have heard a number of different components that I focused on, all right? I've set credibility, I've set expertise, and I've also related to the students and made them feel that, yes, I was just once like them, and in this course, there's going to be massive value, and I certainly enjoy teaching the course. All right, so I do recommend that you start creating your own strategic self-intro. Okay, don't just say, "Oh, I've been a first aid trainer for 20 years. Let's get into it." No, it's more about that. It's more than just that. It's about certainly positioning yourself in the right way that really builds that rapport in a strategic fashion. Okay. Now, the second part is certainly doing icebreakers. Now, an icebreaker has to meet two particular criteria, and that is number one, it needs to make someone feel positive, and it needs to get them interested in the topic. Okay. So, the worst icebreaker that you could certainly do is get somebody to stand up and meet someone and ask them, so what do you do? And tell me something about yourself. And the other question is, why did you come to the course? All right. It's a very bad icebreaker because sometimes people feel uncomfortable about telling another stranger about something interesting about themselves, or even why they're at the course. Okay. And they may say something like, oh, I'm here because I have to be, or something like that. Great icebreaker is always going to link to the topic. And one of my favorites is simply to ask, get someone to go and meet someone and ask them, what do they love most about their current job? And the second question is, what inspired them to start in that role? Or another one could be, let's unpack, for example, first aid. Go and meet someone and find out in their life what and who would they love to be able to have more confidence to give first aid to. And the second question could be, who is your favorite superhero and why? Okay, that's a great couple of questions that are going to really lead into the topic and make someone feel positive about that learning experience. Okay, at all times you want to craft questions that are in the positive. Right? Another one could be, let's say we're talking to teachers, and it could be go and find someone and share. What do they teach? Where do they teach it? What aspect of teaching that do they love the most? And what inspired them to become a teacher? Okay, guaranteed those questions are going to put someone in a very positive state. Okay, now next level was engagement. And as we talked about, the definition is that of response. Engagement equals response. Response equals engagement. Engagement equals response. Okay. Now, great trainers are very effective at getting engagement and response from an audience and consistently getting that engagement. And I highly recommend that you look into things like accelerated learning, because that's going to really show you different strategies that you can use in order to get more response from an audience. Okay, but there's two ways that we can ultimately get engagement from an audience. Number one, we can ask lots of questions, because a question is going to freeze the audience members' minds and it's going to get them thinking. Okay, so we want to ask lots and lots and lots and lots of questions, and we want to allow time and space for them to answer the questions for sure. The second part that we can do is we can vary up the learning modalities, because we need to appreciate that it's the change that keeps somebody engaged. So if you're consistently doing PowerPoint, 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 there is no engagement. Okay? Ultimately, that is the definition of death by PowerPoint, because we can constantly be showing PowerPoints, but there's no shift, and then there's no requirement for the brain to be hooked and engaged on what's going to come next. Okay? And we need to know that varying up the learning modalities is actually what keeps someone engaged. So it's delivering through role plays, videos, activities, different types of activities, getting everybody to stand up, move around, work with different people. It's creating an environment where people are constantly guessing what's going to happen next is what creates the engagement, okay? Because the mind has to stay in a place of anticipation and wonder. So the formula for boredom and how to avoid that disengagement. So what we need to understand is if we want to create engagement, we obviously need to understand the opposite. And when you can understand the formula for boredom, guess what? You suddenly have the recipe for success. All right. So the first part of creating boredom, it's a good thing to know, is creating or presenting irrelevant information. So information has no context or is of any interest to an audience member. So for example, if you stood up to a group of people that had no interest in hiking or no interest in Apple computers, and obviously they're going to be bored instantly. But the second part is even more important, and this part here is about how you deliver the information, and this is repetitive, okay? Overly repetitive or delivered in a way that is predictable, all right? So overly predictable. So we've got irrelevant information plus overly predictable delivery equals boredom. And when we know that we need to keep our audience in anticipation and wonder, we can start to create engagement on demand. And we need to be able to present information in a way that's relevant to the audience and do it in an unpredictable way. And when we can do that, we are always going to have higher levels of engagement, okay? So the key to all engagement is one word, and that one word is suspense. And the more you can build suspense into your training sessions, the more you're going to heighten that sense of anticipation and wonder. But if a student can predict exactly what's going to happen in their session and exactly how the content's going to be delivered, guess what? You've got zero engagement, okay? So the more you can build in moments of, I wonder what's going to happen, moments of, I wonder how it's going to be delivered next, and create those subtle shifts and changes in how you present the information, then you're always going to be able to deliver great engaging sessions, okay? And this is the biggest question that we get asked all the time. How do I get my learners engaged? Well, here's the answer. You simply shift and change how things are going to be delivered, and you create such variety that a learner is always wondering, oh, what activity is coming next? How are we doing it? And there is so much variety that a learner is always getting its learning needs met, okay? Now, attention span is critically important to be aware of. So we need to be aware that a learner these days, and even as humans, our attention span is much shorter than we ever thought before. With Twitter, Facebook, all the different social media and all the different things and technology, our capacity to concentrate for longer periods of time is a lot less. All right? So there is a great article that I highly recommend that you read. It's called the 8-Minute Lecture, and you can certainly Google it. But the thing is, we need to be aware that the optimal attention span or optimal time frame for any activity that we run is 8 minutes, okay? And if we are extending an activity beyond 8 minutes, we are going to lose the attention of our learners, all right? So you definitely want to get very good at creating micro learning experiences that are around the time period of 8 minutes. And that could be as simple as, all right, here's a case study, guys, work through it. 8 minute mark, stop, review it, have a chat, then you take it into something else and something else and something else and something else. But you also train yourself to only ever speak for a period of 8 minutes, and you never let yourself continue after that because you want to have their brains hooked and engaged for the next part. 8 minutes is a magic rule that you need to operate by. Okay? And if you find that things are extending beyond 8 minutes, you're probably going to find that people are dozing off, talking about social things, or they're just getting a little bit antsy. All right? Train yourself to operate in 8 minute chunks. I know it may seem short, however, the more that you get proficient in time frames, the more you're going to find that audience's attention goes way up. Now, last one there is retention. Now, retention, we need to ask ourselves, how much has my learner remembered from my session? Okay, that's a critical question to ask ourselves. So how do we increase the probability they're going to remember something? Number one, we review more and teach less. We really have lots of review activities in here to make sure that we solidify the learning. So review more, teach less, review more, teach less, review more, teach less. So constantly when you teach something, have multiple opportunities for audience members to review it. Now the second part of this is saturation point. You want to make sure that you are not delivering too much information that somebody will forget it easily. All right, so you want to make sure that you teach them content and then you allow somebody time to empty their brain, so to speak, or empty their cup so that they feel comfortable that they've digested the information and they've taken it all in. So this could be an activity such as simply turning to the person next to them and sharing what's the biggest thing that they've learned so far. It could be taking a 5-minute break, a 10-minute break. It could be taking the notes on the slides and then simply sharing with the person next to them what notes have they taken so far. Any kind of review activity that's going to allow them to get the information out of them so that their brain is ready for the next piece. Okay? So retention, if you want to raise it, review more, teach less. Last of all, be aware of the saturation point. Okay, and make sure that you are very aware of how much you are giving them before you go on to the next piece of content. Okay, so in alignment with that, let's go back. So up till now, we've talked about RER, rapport, engagement, retention. So rapport, the level of connection you have with the group, the importance of strategic self-intro, and creating icebreakers that work. All right, and I really encourage you to do quality icebreakers. What is a quality icebreaker? Something that makes someone feel comfortable, positive, and excited about learning. Engagement is a response. And how do we build more response? Use varied questions, use various teaching modalities, and deliver content in multiple ways. Okay? Formula for boredom, we talked about irrelevant information plus overly predictable delivery equals boredom. Key to all engagement is suspense. All right? And teach in shorter chunks so that you raise that level of engagement and suspense as well. And retention, review more, teach less, and be aware of somebody's saturation point. Okay, learning styles, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Now, you probably heard this and heard it to death and read about it in textbooks. But the ultimate thing that I want you to take away from this slide is that unfortunately or fortunately, as a trainer, as a human, you will typically train in your own style, all right? So if you are more of a visual person, you are probably going to use more PowerPoints. If you are more of an auditory person, you're probably going to use more discussions and lectures. If you are more of a kinesthetic person, you are probably going to do more role plays. Now that's fine, but what you need to understand is that your audience are not you and you are not your audience. Every single person in your audience has different learning styles and learning needs. So the ultimate trainer can cater to all three learning styles. And they can create the visual, auditory, kinesthetic experience for the learner and not just deliver through one modality. All right. So you need to be looking at your session plan and your session structure and go, okay, cool. Here's some visual stuff. Here's some auditory. Here's some kinesthetic. And here's some other auditory. Here's some other visual. And you need to be deliberate in how you deliver your content and be deliberate to make sure that you are meeting everybody's styles. Because just because you're visual, it doesn't mean everybody else is visual. And as a trainer, you need to expand your repertoire of how you deliver information so that you meet everybody's needs. When you first start out, you will guaranteed operate off what is natural for you, okay? So I'll give you an example for myself. When I first started out, I didn't use PowerPoint very much at all. I didn't like it because I'm not a visual person, okay? I'm much more an auditory and kinesthetic type of trainer. However, I needed to learn over time that there were visual people in my training session. And if they didn't see a handout or a PowerPoint, they wouldn't feel like they'd actually learned something. Okay? The kinesthetic people, if there's no role plays or activities in your session, they will walk away thinking they haven't learned something. Okay? Auditory people, if they don't have an opportunity to discuss concepts, they will walk away thinking they haven't learned something. All right? It's critically important that we cater to all learning needs and learning styles. All right. Positive learning environment, you certainly want to create that where people respect each other, learn from their mistakes, try their best, create new possibilities. They're a team and they celebrate each other's successes. 7 final tips to keep the learning environment positive. Acknowledge learnings for showing up and acknowledge learners for showing up. What we mean by that is really acknowledge them for even coming along to the session, all right? And say to them, look, I really appreciate how much you've got going on in your life. I know that it took a lot of work to be here today. Thank you for showing up, okay? Affirm all good behavior, coming back from breaks, excuse the typo, on time. Number 3, calibrate the amount of pressure and intensity you apply, all right? So at some moments, you are going to need to put on real pressure on the learners. Other times, you'll need to ease it off to make sure that they feel comfortable in going through what they do. Over pressuring someone can lead to them popping and not feeling like they're in a good emotional state. Okay, take brain breaks for sure. Number 5, be careful with your checking questions. What are you really happy about? What you just did is a great question. What is getting easier for you? What would you like to acknowledge yourself for? These are powerful check-in questions. But if you said, what did you get from the activity? Or another question could be, do you understand what we just did? Okay, those are closed questions and could possibly elicit a negative answer. But when you say, what is getting easier for you? Then the learner's brain is automatically going to search for the answer that we really want to hear. Okay, what would you like to acknowledge yourself for is a powerful question to really affirm their identity as a committed learner. All right, acknowledge questions from the audience for sure. So if Mary says, "Oh, I've got a question," at the end of it, you can say, "That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that question," and you can then go ahead and answer the question. Deal with threats to peace quickly. So if you find that a learner is being disruptive, certainly deal with that as quick as possible. And we talk about ways to do that certainly in the future. All right. Powerful questions to ask yourself when designing any learning activity. First question, is it safe? What is the learning outcome I want my students to have? How do I want them to feel through the activity and afterwards? How will I ensure that they take away the learnings that I want them to have? I.e., what will my cleanup be? Okay. What we mean by that is after you finish the activity, how are you going to debrief? What questions are you going to ask the learners? What questions are you going to get them to ask each other? Okay. And one of the simplest questions to ask them after an activity would be, what's the biggest thing that you learned from that activity that we just did? And get them to write it down. Okay. Is it better for them to know the outcome going into the activity or to be told afterwards? Okay, who will I pair people up with? Okay, is you need to make sure that you put the right personalities with the right personalities so that you create a conducive learning environment. Okay, types of activities, you can certainly do reflection tasks, discussions, research, case studies, different scenarios, simulations or role plays, videos, fault finding activities, contrast activities, list activities. Okay, so a fault finding activity would be when you showed a video and you got the learners to identify what is the person doing wrong in the video. A contrast activity would simply be getting the learners to unpack and identify the difference between two concepts. So for example, if I said, what's the difference between training and education? That would be a contrast activity. If I said to the learners, what would be the difference between a professional a sports person and an amateur person? Well, that's a contrast activity. If I said, what's the difference between a profitable business and an unprofitable business? That would be a contrast activity. Okay. List activity would be when you said to the learners, I'd like you to write down top 6 qualities of a great trainer. That's an example of a list activity. These are really powerful because they get the learners thinking, and you have to realize that the learners will always believe what they say more than whatever you will say. All right. So when it comes from them, it's always more powerful. I highly recommend that you start to get confident and comfortable with using a variety of different activities, and you can think of something on the spot and then just go, all right, cool, I will do this X activity, and just be more and more comfortable and familiar with different activities that you can bring in at a moment's notice. All right. You've also got mix and match activities. You've got fill in the gap activities. All right. So have a great repertoire of different ways that you can deliver your content, okay? Because the average trainer only has maybe 1 or 2. The expert or the master trainer can think of different things on the spot and has a solution and a strategy to deliver content in a way that really makes a learner wake up and certainly travel through the learning journey safely and effectively. Review activities. As much as the activities are important, we also need to have activities that help them review. Okay, so things like turn to the person next to you and share one thing that you've learned so far. Really powerful technique. Did you know activities? So get a learner to go and speak to another learner and say, did you know? And they simply share something they've written down. Did you know that ASQA is the national vet regulator for RTOs? Did you know? Did you know? Did you know? And you just do it in a fun, engaging way where they just look at their notes and just say to each person they meet, did you know that the Cert 4 TA has 10 units of competency? Did you know that language literacy and numeracy is a big issue in Australia? Did you know? All right, it's a great, fun, simple thing you can do. Go around the room and, all right, this is simply putting them in a room, in a small group, and getting them to share in a group of 3. What are the top 3 things that they've learned so far, or the top 3 things that they're going to take away from the session? Okay. Advice to a newbie. This is when you would get the learners in groups and actually write down what advice would they have to a brand new person coming into the industry, okay, based on what you've taught them. Okay. Review own notes, and well, that could be as simple as they look at their own notes and they put an asterisk against something that they're definitely going to go out and implement. Okay. Biggest aha, that would simply be each person sharing in the group what's their biggest aha so far. Okay. Teach back to each other in small groups. That's when you actually get them in small groups and get one person in the group teaching and reteaching what's been learnt so far. And as we've talked about with the cone of learning, we all know that the more you get learners teaching each other, the more they're going to retain that information. Okay. So finishing a session strong, you definitely want to recap on key points. Use a powerful story is another great way to finish a sentence. Reaffirm their hard work and effort. Make them feel great. All right. Acknowledge them for what they've achieved. Use powerful self-reflection questions and ask them what their biggest takeaway concept is from the session, and even more so, how will they be applying that concept going forward. Okay? As we talked about, all training is creating change in another individual, and if change doesn't happen, well, really, it was just entertainment. It wasn't really a training session, so to speak. okay? We're always looking to create long-term change. No matter the amount of interaction we have with someone, we're looking to create seeds of change, okay? So that essentially is the session. Hopefully you got a lot out of this session. This overarching concept of rapport, engagement, retention, it's a model and a concept that you can really dive deep into, and it gives you a great framework, all right? So in the next session, we're going to talk about what you would say, when you would say it, and the structure that you would go through when you're delivering your content. So thank you so much for watching this session. And if you haven't yet joined the TAE graduate group, definitely make sure that you do that. And if you're not sure how to find a link, definitely reach out to the office and we'll add you to the group. Advanced Trainer Bootcamp, definitely find out more about that if you want to find out about how to take these concepts to the next level. And thank you so much for your time, energy, and focus for this webinar.